Hey guys, welcome to day 2 of our percussion lessons. Today we're going to be talking about basic rhythm skills and sight reading. So to begin, we're just going to go through some very basics on note duration, and then just reading, just some basics before we get started. So here I've got sort of a tree, and the way I like to think about it is if we're in 4/4, there are 4 notes per measure, and the 4 means that the quarter note gets the beat. So in a bar of 4/4, this is what that measure would look like. You would get 4 beats in that measure. All right. Now, as far as the note durations, we're just going to start with the biggest one, and this is a whole note. And then inside of a whole note, you can have 2 half notes, and then you can have 4 quarter notes. Then you can have all these eighth notes. So every quarter note is divided into 2 eighth notes. And then it breaks it down even more to where in each beat you now get 4 16th notes. Cool. So you have 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16. And they can all fit in the span of the same length of each other. All right, so that's just visually how I like to think about it, because you start with the biggest value and it breaks down into these smaller values. Here, we'll talk about triplet in a little bit. For now, let's just start with a quick example. So here's 4/4, that's our time signature. This is probably the most common time signature that you'll see. And then we'll start with 4 quarter notes. And then let's go F notes, and then end with a, okay. One of the tools that I like to use when I'm practicing is a metronome. Right here we have a metronome, and all that does is it gives you the time so that you're staying consistent. So here I have a metronome, and I've got it set to 70, which is just how many beats per measure, or minute. What is it, beats per minute? Let's start that second. And now it's not wanting to work. Classic technology, am I right? Oh, I'm butchering this lesson. Here's my metronome. And you can set it to different tempos depending on how fast or slow you would like to practice things. So right now I've got it set to 4/4, which is our time signature. I've got it set to 70, which is closer to the slower side of things, and 70 BPM just refers to the beats per minute. So here it is, set at 70. All right. Now, I've got my metronome going. Here's an example. And in this measure, you've got 4 quarter notes, got 2 half notes, and a whole note. So this is how that would sound if I were to clap it. 1, 2, ready, go. All right. I'm going to do that one more time, and this time I'm going to count along just so you know where everything's falling. Cool? 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right? So that's just an example of how these fit into a measure. So again, the quarter notes, you get 4. In the same time space, you get 2 half notes. In the same space, you get 1 whole note. All right? Now, if we were to make this a little more complicated, we could do a measure of eighth notes and then add some 16th notes in there too. All right? So let's do the quarter notes again. Into a measure of eighth notes, 4, let's just start there. All right, so here's our metronome. One, two, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. All right. Now, if you notice, when I was saying that out loud, I added ands in between these. So if we mark out where these beats fall, you've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then you've got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. All right, and that's just a really helpful way to count those out. All right, let's try it one more time. Maybe you can do this with me. All right, so if you're at home watching this, go ahead and clap these rhythms with me. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. All right, it's really important when you're clapping these rhythms out to actually say the numbers. It's just another way to really help internalize that and know exactly what beat you're on. All right, so these are quarter notes and then eighth notes. And again, eighth notes because there are 8 in this measure, and then quarter notes because there are 4. All right. Another cool thing about the metronome is you can often subdivide. So I can add those eighth notes in here, and you will hear it when I add it. So these are the quarter notes, and now I'm adding the eighth notes in. Again, so with just the quarter notes. Another thing I do want to mention is this is a really nice metronome. That's not wanting to work. Classic. But you can also get a free version on your phones. This one I like to use. It's called the Tempo app, and it does exactly the same thing. You can subdivide and all those kind of things. So I would encourage everybody to get one of these. This one is called the Tempo app. If it's not free, there are plenty of free versions, but this one's probably only a few dollars. I like having the app because that means I never leave home without it, and anytime I want to practice, I can just pull it up. But then it's also handy to get one of these guys too. So yeah, if we move to 16th notes, that's going to be twice as fast as this. So in the same space that you would play these 4 quarter notes or these 8 eighth notes, you've got to fit 16 notes in there. So it's going to look really small on this, but I just want to make sure that you know it's not any longer. It's exactly the same length of time. You just have to play more notes in that same time. All right? So again, the metronome, super handy because I can go from playing just quarter notes to then adding the eighth notes. And all the eighth notes is twice as fast as the quarter notes. Then you add the 16th notes in. All right, back to eighth notes. Back to quarter notes. And just like this measure where we added an extra word to help you count that, the way you would do 16th notes would be 1 E and All right. So I'm going to draw it a little bit bigger here so you can see that hopefully a little bit better. 1 E and that's how I would count those out. So here you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. So you notice there what I did was each beat I just replaced the number. So that first beat is going to be 1 E and a. The second beat would be 2 E and then so on and so forth. 3 and a and then a 4. All right? And all that is just to help you count that out and divide that up. So again, now if we pick up our sticks, which I encourage you to do, let's go ahead and do this on a practice pad. I'm gonna set the metronome. I'm gonna add a fourth bar in here, and we'll add 2 half notes in there. All right, so I'm gonna play it once and then we'll play it again, and I encourage you to play it with me. All right, so here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now a few things just to notice. Again, I know we're also reading now, but it's really important to focus also on your technique. So like we talked about in the first video, you want to have this position where your shoulders are kind of relaxed. You're just moving your hand up as if you're shaking somebody's hand. And then you have the triangle shape or upside down V, and you're playing somewhat in the center. Another tool that I really enjoy using to practice is practice pad. That just is helpful. I live in a small apartment. A snare drum's really loud. So having a practice pad like this allows me to practice anywhere, and it's a good solution. You don't get the same tones that we talked about in the first video, but as far as practicing rhythms and just kind of getting comfortable with basic things, practice pads are another great tool. This one is by Remo, Vic Firth. A lot of companies, they sell various practice pads. So metronomes and practice pads, really great tools to use. So let's do it again. We're focusing on our technique. We don't want our pinkies to get loose. A lot of times when we're not focusing, our pinkies will come out. We're using the fulcrum that we talked about in the first video, and our wrists are down, but the top of our hands are up. All right, so let's do it again. I'm gonna go even slower. Let's go to 60. Let's play this rhythm. So one more time. I'll play it through, and then you can play it along with me. 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E. 2, 3, 4. All right. Now one thing I did there was, once you get comfortable playing this rhythm and you're used to it, just take a glance down at your hands as you're doing it. This is pretty simple once you get comfortable with it. So a lot of times when I'm practicing a pattern that's repetitive and easy to remember, where I don't have to just be staring at what it is, I like to just play it and then look at my hands and observe where some problems were. So even with me there, I noticed that my index finger was coming off the stick, and I just adjusted. And that's all part of doing this, is making adjustments. This all adds into reading music, into playing, is being able to do multiple things at once. So not only are you listening to what you're playing, you're reading it, but then you're also like looking at your hands, adjusting, making sure the technique is good and you're getting good sounds. All right. So that is some basic rhythm stuff. I'm going to put up some examples, and then we're going to go into the next part of this lesson, which is going to talk about sight reading. All right, so we just got done talking about some basic rhythms and how to count that, how to practice that. We also got to talk about rests. Now, rests are similar to the rhythms in that you get different values. What a rest is it's the time where you're not playing, you're resting. So, for example, here you've got our quarter notes, or you can also have quarter rests, and that's what they look like. You've got your half notes and your half rests. And this one, they kind of look like a hat. So hat, half is kind of a way that I try to remember it. And then you have your whole note and your whole rests. And this one, if you think that this looks kind of like a sidewalk or the floor, this almost looks like a hole in the ground. So whole rest. Cool? So again, these are the notes that you're playing. These are the notes that you're resting. Quarter note, quarter rest, half note, half rest, whole note, whole rest. You also have eighth rests, which looks like this, and that here's an eighth note by itself. We were looking at ones that were tied together in the other video, or other segment of this video. And then you have a 16th rest, which looks like this. And that would be for a 16th note. All right, but we're mainly going to focus on these top ones right here, okay? So now we're moving on to sight reading. And again, the metronome is going to be our friend. There are a couple different ways to practice sight reading. What is sight reading? Sight reading is reading something for the first time. So you're in a band class and the teacher hands you a piece of music. You usually have maybe about, I don't know, a minute, 2 minutes before you start playing that sheet of music. And so sight reading is just reading that piece of music through the first time. And then usually those couple of seconds or the minute before you actually play it, there are a couple things that you can do just to quickly glance at the music to kind of get a head start. Before you even play a brand new piece of music, you're looking for certain things that might be, and now this marker's dead too. Pause. Well, my marker died, so I'm switching to the green marker. So where were we? We were talking about sight reading. There's a couple things that you can do that are kind of helpful in just preparing to read that piece. So here is my piece of music. I'm going to add here what is a repeat. So if you don't know, when you see a symbol like this, it just means you're repeating. From here, you're going back and playing from here back through there. Cool? So that's a repeat sign. So here's two measures of music. I've never seen this before in my life, but the first thing I notice is the repeat sign. So that's something to watch out for when you're going to play this. I know that I see that repeat sign, so then I'm looking at, okay, where does that go back to? So that goes back to here. So that's the first thing. Then I'm also noticing you've got a couple rests in there. That's something to notice, all right? So those are the first things. Let's say it had some dynamics. So in the first lesson we talked about having different dynamics. So here we've got quiet, medium, and then loud. So piano, mezzo forte, forte. All right. So these are all things that you take note of before you even begin to play it. You notice the repeats, some rests, you've got some dynamics, and there's tons of other things that could be thrown your way in a piece of music, but just in this example, those would be the biggest things. So then now, if I'm just practicing a new piece of music, I find a comfortable tempo. So we've been working at 60 BPM. So that's kind of where I start. And a key thing with sight reading is you don't want to stop. Part of practicing sight reading is learning the ability of reading and reading ahead and keep moving. You can't, if you're in a live environment where you're playing with other musicians, you can't just stop and go back to where you messed up. You got to keep going. You play the page through, and that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to sight read this piece of music. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Rest. All right, so I've messed up. I've made a mistake. A couple things I didn't do was I didn't play the dynamic. I didn't play this rhythm right. So once you've read something, sight read something through the first time, again, you don't stop, you keep going. And at the end of it, now I have to isolate where my problem areas were. So I didn't play dynamics and I messed up a rhythm. So then the second time, now that you know that, you maybe work on that. So now I'm working on it. So dynamics, okay, I'm playing it soft, and then this measure, 1, rest, rest. All right, I've isolated a problem, and now I'm going to go back and read it through again without stopping. 1, 2, ready, go. Rest, 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 rest. All right? And that's how you practice sight reading. It's kind of weird because I read it twice, so technically the second time I'm not sight reading. But if you read something more than 2 or 3 times, at that point you're just practicing, which is also great. Like there are a lot of books and resources that you can use to practice sight reading. If you go to Salvation Army Corps, you can use a tune book and just read through the hymns and just practice reading your rhythms. Again, I would maybe read it through one time and then isolate a few problems, read it through a second time, and then I'd move on to another exercise. So another good sight reading practice tip would be to, even before you play it, you can read through the exercise and just either clap it or sing the rhythms out loud. And what that does is help you kind of internalize some of those rhythms without having to worry about which hand you're using and something like that. So if I write another... All right, here's my example. Okay, I'm now looking at it. I'm going to set my metronome. I'm not even going to hold the drumsticks. I'm just going to look at it and read it through. And now I'm going to say the rhythms. So for this one, I'm just going to write it out just because I'm trying to be helpful to everyone. But 2 and 3E and 4. All right. So even before I pick up the sticks and play it, I'm thinking 1, 2, and 3E and a 4. 1, 2, and 3E and a 4. So then I go to clap it, and maybe that's too fast, so I slow it down. One, 2, and 3E and a 4. 1, 2, and 3E and a 4. All right, and then now I'm ready to play it. I've looked it over. I've thought about the counting, especially this one where it's a little more tricky, and now I'm ready to play it. All right. 1, 2, and 3E and a 4. 1, 2, and... All right. And that's pretty much some basic techniques and tips that you can use for sight reading. I'm gonna write a couple rhythms out, and I'm gonna hit the metronome and try and play along with me. All right. So. Okay. All right. So we have a few minutes before we play it. I'm looking at it. There are no repeats, no dynamics. There's a couple rests in there. So let's give it a shot. All right, here we go. I'm going to bring up the tempo just a hair. One, 2, ready, go. rest, rest, rest. All right, let's give that one more shot. 1, 2, ready, go. Rest, rest. Cool? All right, I'll do another one. Okay, here's another exercise. Let's do the same thing. We'll take a look at it. There's a couple rests. These are eighth notes, so 1 and 3 and there's a rest on beat 4. And again, sight reading is just about trial and error. The most important thing is to try and keep going, and then once you've played through the exercise, then you see, okay, there are a couple areas where I made some mistakes. Let's add some dynamics in here. All right, so you've got piano, you've got forte, forte, mezzo forte, piano. So again, really quiet, loud, loud, medium loud, quiet again. Okay, so set the metronome and try these with me. 1, 2, ready, go. 2, 4. Let's do it one more time. 2, ready, go. 2, 4. All right. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us today. For all these videos, I really encourage you to pause and rewind and to really digest all this information for these rhythms. Play it through, pause, rewind, play it through again. Really try out all these things multiple times, and then maybe take some notes, write down some sight reading ideas, and then just to practice them. Again, the metronome is going to be your best friend on this. Really get used to using that in everything you do. You know, for us as percussionists, our main focus, especially on a snare drum, is getting these rhythms right and really practicing those and getting comfortable with what they sound like and the tone and that stuff. Other people, when they're playing a brass instrument, they have to worry about pitches and notes and stuff like that. Our main focus is to get these rhythms right. So we really have no excuse other than to just really practice these and make sure that we are providing a really solid foundation for the rest of the ensemble. Again, just rewind, watch these videos over, redo these exercises, and enjoy. Have fun.